It's just a couple of weeks before the federal budget comes out from a government that has vowed to empower female entrepreneurs. Ahead of it, a report says women are being left behind by funding for Canadian innovation. For some more perspective on the story, we're joined by the tech entrepreneur Nicole Verkindt, the CEO of OMX, and a judge on Dragon's Den Next Gen Den. Nice to see you again.
Too, John.
So this was a study that came out this week. The Canadian government was involved in looking into this story. It gets to that subject of innovation and how we define innovation. Maybe sometimes we look at tech companies and we look at financing for those startups, but that innovation can actually be happening everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to take away from the fact that it is important we get more women into STEM, and that we do look at the scale up and the big growth, and which tend to be an engineering focused, technology focused companies. And OMX is a technology company, but I'm not a technical founder. So I think it's important we have a conversation about the difference between an inventor, which is more scientific, and you kind of think of an Isaac Newton type, versus an innovator. And the studies that I've read is that more than 80% of innovation is in this adapt, adopt kind of range, which is very, very great. It's not always a technical founder. You could be taking OMX, for instance. We looked at CRM solutions and applied it to supply chain.
Right.
There was innovation there, but there wasn't a lot of invention necessarily. So there's a lot of innovation just on business models. I just think the definition needs to be widened out. We need to acknowledge that you can have a niche market and gain a lot of market share just by innovating on a business model or on the way you provide a service or your brand or creativity or those types of areas.
So, I mean, the example, just to inform our viewers, with the evolution of OMX, you grew up on the factory floor.
That's right.
Your family was doing business in different countries, and there's a whole thing around the supply chain, where is something coming from?
Yeah.
And you took all those learnings, you said, well, in an old economy industry, they can use technology like this. So that's kind of the evolution for you.
That's
for
right.
example.
And I dipped into all sorts of different online solutions I was using in my day-to-day life, like LinkedIn and Facebook and QuickBooks Online and all these different things that we're seeing in consumer markets. And the industrial markets tend to kind of lag behind. There tends to be a long tail there. And so you apply them to that niche market. And I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs be successful that way. They have a domain expertise and they apply something like an Uber concept to that domain that they have knowledge in.
So it feels like this is a good conversation to have at a time when there's a lot of interest, it feels like, at all levels of government to see big technology companies come to Canada, or for our next big company to be a technology company. But even in this study, there was a lot of focus on small business and how many successful small businesses are run by women. And I mean, look at the reaction in this country to changes to taxes and how that would impact small business.
Yeah.
Arguably, that is the engine of our economy, as opposed to, one big winner in the world of technology.
Well, they're both very important,
Yeah.
but nowadays, because of digitization, you can run a pretty successful business that's small and that you're selling all over the world to one niche market.
Yeah. So, I mean, as the federal budget approaches, and this has been on the agenda, what are the kinds of things that you as an entrepreneur are curious to hear the government talk about when it comes to innovation, competitiveness, the ability of you to grow your business?
For me, what I've been harping on is, if you want to support women entrepreneurs, there needs to be more of a mechanism for government to buy from Canadian technologies, and some of those will be run by women. I think, and that is happening through a program called the Build in Canada Innovation Program. But now you have to go the next step. So once they've bought that first prototype, how do you continue to scale and buy more? So how do we actually support our entrepreneurs by buying from them, and in the venture capital world, investing in them? So those, to me, are the two real drivers that will help grow innovative companies.
So, I mean, this is important, I think, at a time when there's this uncertainty around NAFTA, and we had Don Walker, who runs Magna, on the program, almost sending this message: don't screw it up, to the different levels of government on what happens with NAFTA. How is it impacting your business? Because you could probably actually win business these days, I would imagine, through all this head spinning that we're seeing over, what is sourced from what country or whatever. So there's probably an opportunity for you here too. But in terms of, if NAFTA gets ripped apart, what are the ramifications for something like that?
the ramifications will be huge. I mean, I would definitely say more than 80% of my business is coming from U.S. companies, and it's a non-traditional export when it's a digital export. And so I think we need to really widen that definition of exports when we think about an American person accessing your online website, that kind of thing. The implications for us, you're right, we are doing country of origin tracking throughout supply chain. So the more governments around the world are saying we want to know how American or how whatever country, how much is this product from there, that will definitely help my business because we're tracking all the different levels of suppliers and that country of origin. But you're right. We have to get it right. I think we do have a huge opportunity in Canada now, though, because we are positioned to sell around the world. We do have trade agreements in Europe and Asia, and so we are positioned to be able to be that platform to sell around the world. And we do see American companies saying maybe a Canadian operation or a Canadian second headquarters or a Canadian partnership could help me sell around the world. And so that market is really up for grabs too. And digital companies can sell around the world pretty quickly, right?
All right. So at the end of the day, the idea of just having a background of sort of a tech entrepreneur or a scientist maybe misses the whole story of innovation.
Yeah, and it needs to happen in every single part of our economy. We have a really, very small population. For us to do well, we have to innovate throughout the economy. And it's not just the scientist or the engineer's job in a company. It could be a procurement person saying, I'm willing to look at online solutions and access data to make myself more competitive.
So if you're,
and it applies to every sector.
If you're one of those people, and maybe you could share your own experience too, is there access to capital for those people? Because if you've got like an AI startup, it feels like people have been falling over themselves to invest in your company from abroad. But for those other pockets of the economy where there's a bright light, an interesting idea, has there been financing to grow those companies?
I had a very difficult time accessing capital. We had to go to our customers and basically ask them to help pre-fund our growth. So I think it is very difficult still if you're in a seed stage to access capital to grow as an innovator.
Okay, all big issues to watch. Great to get your perspective as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, Nicole.
Thanks, John.
Nicole Verkindt, the CEO of OMX and a judge on Dragon's Den Next Gen Den. We're going to take